Welcome to 100 Songs Define Heavy Metal. I'm your host, Brian Slagel. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records, home to bands like Metallica, Slayer, Amon Amarth, Gwar, Cannibal Corpse, Fate's Warning, Armored Saint, and many more. We have a new sponsor here at 100 Songs to Define Heavy Metal. It's the Metal Blade Museum and Store, located in Las Vegas, Nevada, right near the Strip. We have a ton of stuff in there from 43 years of Metal Blade. We've got Metallica stuff, we've got Slayer stuff, we've got Gwar, we've got Lizzie Borden. We've got tons and tons of stuff in there. We've got vinyl that you can look at for old stuff. We've got a ton of artifacts. We also have a lot of metal bands, too, that Metal Blade has worked with, like Deep Purple and Alice Cooper and Stars and Guns N' Roses and Thin Lizzy. So there's a lot of great artifacts there. It really is the ultimate heavy metal museum. And recently, we also have moved our Metal Blade retail store into the museum. So that's in the first part. When you first walk in, the store is there. Free to get into the store. You got to pay to get into the museum. But for more information, go to metalblade.com/museum. This episode is a fun one for me because it includes my favorite guitar player of all time, Mr. Michael Schenker, and my favorite lead that he's done of all time on the amazing UFO song Rock Bottom. Now, there's a couple versions of this song, obviously. We're talking a lot. For me, I go back to the original studio version because that's where I first heard it. And then later, of course, the incredible live version. And there's a lot of different versions, which we'll talk about during the course of the show, too, that you want to check out if you're a fan of the song or, importantly, a fan of Michael Schenker. And if you're not, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast. Anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun today. We're going to talk to my good buddy Jay Ruston about the production, and then also my good friend Phil Demmel, who's currently in Kerry King's incredible band. And he's an amazing guitar player. And he actually played with Michael Schenker on stage once. So that'll be a fun story. But as always, we begin it with our friend from the north, Mr. Martin Popoff.
Excellent pick there, Brian. UFO Rock Bottom. Absolutely immense song. UFO's masterpiece. Probably their most famous song. Probably more famous than Dr. Doctor. It's their Sails of Charon. It's their Stargazer. It's their Smoke on the Water. An absolute classic. This came on Phenomenon. This is the first record with Michael Schenker, issued May 1974, their first album with Chrysalis after the Mick Bolton years. And Leo Lyons is producing this album, does a very capable job. He produces also the next one, Force It, and No Heavy Petting. I personally think No Heavy Petting sounds better than the Ron Nevison albums. I think that's their best sounding album. This song absolutely dominates this album as an absolute classic. Of course, there is Dr. Doctor as well. So, there's some strength to this record, but it's still fairly murky. It's closer to a Scorpion's Lonesome Crow or a Fly to the Rainbow than it is even the Mick Bolton years. Great song, long song, interesting length, 6:32. So this is not super long, epic, and it's not short either. It's got a lot of parts. Our band back in the 80s, Torque, we played this song. It's a fun song to play on drums with all its stops and starts. It's the chorus has kind of like a Bill Ward, War Pigs sort of, clumps of drum fills sort of feel to it. It's got stops and starts at the very end when it has the big wind up. It's got the halftime section. And yeah, speaking of Sabbath, I suppose that halftime section really has an early Black Sabbath vibe as well to it. And then it goes into that jam section where you've got the jazzy chords and the soloing. That feels like something Black Sabbath would do on the first Black Sabbath album. So yeah, it has a lot of movements to it. Most important about this song is its very scientific and modern metal riff, and that's why we remember this song so good. It's like an early speed metal classic. You didn't get a lot of songs this kind of complicated of riff. As Michael Schenker puts it, it started out in rehearsal as just a riff, and they kept adding to it. And then Phil came around and said, I know how to turn this into a song. And they turned it into a song. It's basically about a hooker. There's not much more to it. It's a little poetic, right? It's looking into her mind and sort of seeing the corruption that goes on. I think it mentions 17 and then 21. So the lyrics are actually kind of cool and oblique. There's not a lot of them, but it's about sort of the corruption that goes on in a hooker type situation, I suppose. But yeah, really, really cool song. And like I say, it's a little more Sabbathy than I thought. It's got a very famous guitar solo to it, which builds in that sort of Child in Time, La Villa Strangiato sort of way. It gets more exciting and more dramatic. And again, very Tony Iommi sort of chords in there. But what we remember the most is this is essentially the coming out party for Michael Schenker as a minor level guitar hero. He's not a massive guitar hero. I always say it goes from Jimi Hendrix to Eddie Van Halen, and everybody else is sort of kind of second tier. But yeah, he comes out as sort of a feature artist in this band, the only German in this British band. So there you go. Absolute classic, UFO Rock Bottom from Phenomenon, May 1974.
Thank you, Martin. Always love what he brings to the show because he has a lot of really interesting perspectives and anecdotes and things about songs, which I like. And I'm glad that he brought up the drumming part of it too. Andy Parker is just such a phenomenal drummer and doesn't really get as much credit as he should because everybody looks at Schenker as, the incredible player and UFO. I mean, the whole band was great. Pete Way and obviously Phil Mogg is an incredible singer. But yeah, Andy Parker is just such a great drummer and as Martin mentions, is really, really great on this song. So he probably doesn't get mentioned as much on this song as he should. But great band. And as always, Martin does a great job. Thank you. And
This episode is brought to you by Stouffer's. Here comes 3-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling 4 things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
once again, we welcome in Mr. Jay Ruston, who's produced Corey Taylor, Armored Saint, Coheed and Cambria, Avatar, and Mon Amarth, 4 million amazing bands. How are you, Jay?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thanks for having me back.
Funny story about this song. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, when I first bought this record in the U.S. in the late 70s or whenever I came into UFO a little bit later, but I went back and listened to everything. But this record sounded terrible, like awful. It was muddy and it just sounded really awful. I was like, what? This is so weird. Why did this record sound so bad? Because the same people that did Force It, and Force It sounds amazing. So at some point in time, I can't remember if it was when CDs came out or maybe they finally did something, but they cleaned it up and made it sound like Force It. So it sounded much better. But I'll never forget that first version of it was just so awful. I couldn't even listen to it, which is a shame because you have songs like Rock Bottom on it, which, arguably contains one of the greatest guitar solos of all time.
I would say so, yes. And it's an interesting thing that you mentioned that because I'm somewhat familiar with UFO. I've seen them live a few times. I'm a huge Michael Schenker fan. Growing up near Detroit, there was about 4 UFO songs that got played on the radio. So, and this was one of them, Rock Bottom. And interestingly, the producer, Lee Lyons, I think his name is.
Leo Lyons,
yeah. From 10 Years After.
Yes.
He was their bass player, I think, right?
Yes, correct.
So they did this at essentially what became Battery Studios in London, but back in the day, Morgan Studios, which everybody recorded there. I think 3 Sabbath records, Judas Priest, Zeppelin did some of Led Zeppelin 2 there. I mean, just legendary place, clearly a great studio. But listening to this record, the guitar sound is amazing, of course, but the drums, it's a little thin, doesn't have especially for that era and that time frame, they were getting pretty fat drum sounds at that point. So when records come out from that era and the drums don't sound great, it always bugs me because I know they can.
I do like the production on this record. It's very, I imagine they didn't have much time to make it because they were, they weren't a very big band at that point. This is Michael Schenker's first album after they were.
Yeah, this is the first thing he did.
Yeah, after they were a space rock band or whatever it was.
Right.
But it was very minimal, but I like it because it's very simple. I think you can hear everything well. I think it sounds pretty good for a 1970s produced record, which I like, but very, very basic. And you can kind of feel that they probably did a lot of this stuff live and there wasn't certainly not a lot of overdubs. I mean, in a lot of cases, it's just the one guitar on there. But I don't mind the production though. It's minimal, but I kind of like it that sometimes like Kiss Dressed to Kill was a very minimal produced record, but it's a great record.
But see, that's where at that time the songs were so good they just stood on their own. And to me, it sounds like a fairly basic doubled guitar track. And I know his mindset towards this was that this guitar solo's never finished.
Yeah.
every time they play it live, what in his brain is he's still evolving the solo, which I think is brilliant.
Yes.
Because it's so great already, you know. And I'd be interested to like listen to a lot of live versions of this song just to see how he's evolved it. When you've heard something so many times like this, it's hard to imagine it any other way.
I mean, that's the brilliance of this record. It's just, you know, Michael Schenker coming on board and with this amazing guitar player just out of nowhere. The band shifted so differently from what they were before, and still a lot of the same guys. And Andy Parker's an amazing, I mean, the whole band, he's an amazing drummer. Pete Way's amazing bass player, obviously Schenker. And then you had Phil Mogg. It was like why they were so great, because like every component of the band at that point were all incredible musicians and or singers. And Schenker being, you know, the king of the crop at that point.
Rock bottom, rock bottom, rock bottom.
It's one thing I miss is the 70s rock singer. They all had something so unique, and you knew their voice immediately. A lot of times you knew the drummer immediately, you knew the guitar immediately. That's something, you know, really missing, and I know you feel the same way about rock and metal these days, is that identity, people finding their own sound. And, you know, I somewhat blame like the computer version of production that we all use now, because we all have access to the same stuff. And back then you didn't, you know, most people didn't know what amps guitar players were using in the studio. You know, certainly whatever they were using on stage was maybe a hint, but it didn't mean they were. And you could just be unique, and especially the vocalist, and his voice is incredible. I've always loved his voice, and it's unique. And the second you hear it, you know it's him.
It's interesting though. They love album music. Well, Spotify does it now too, but they have the lyrics on there, because half of the time I really have no idea what he's saying for all these years. I'm like, what is that? Oh, that's what it is. Now I get it. But all these English singers, man, I don't know what it was happening in England, but there's so many legendary singers, and they, you know, a lot of them came from England that in the, you know, 70s basically. Like what's up with the water over there or something?
I think there was just a lot of depression, post-war poverty. And I mean, look at what came out of Birmingham. It created this tidal wave basically of amazing music. The guitar players and singers and drummers, it's absolutely mind-blowing what came out of a place the size of Texas.
I think part of it too was, you know, England back then, there was literally nothing to do. They had like 3 TV channels that were done by 10 or 11 o'clock at night. There's other than, you know, playing football, soccer with your mates or whatever, that, or drinking. That's about the extent of what you had to do in England. So you had plenty of time to hone your craft, so to say, whether it's a singer or a bass player, drum or whatever. You could just sit and rehearse or practice forever, because there literally wasn't anything else to do.
Exactly, and the same could be said for Sweden. You know, they might have had a few more activities, maybe some skiing, but you know, otherwise, hockey for sure. But like otherwise, if you weren't into sports, you were making music. And between Sweden and the UK, the output of music in the 70s and 80s is just mind blowing.
Yeah, and even today, I mean, Sweden is just filled with so many bands from so many different genres.
Yes.
I think I read somebody did a study on like just music in general, and per capita, Sweden has more musicians, bands, whatever, than any other country in the world, which is crazy. It's all ABBA.
Exactly. We talked about $1 Billion Babies a while back, and this was recorded in the same studio. And that record has a really nice fat bottom end. So I think a lot of the issues with this record come down to like the mix and the mastering, because it clearly wasn't the studio or the band.
Yeah, and like I said, I know they didn't have a lot of time to record it or a lot of money, so it was, you know, it was one of those pretty quick things. And you know, as great as Leo Lyons is as a player, you know, I don't know that he was, you know, regaled as the greatest producer of all time. That being said, though, it sounds really good. I like the way it sounds. Orson is definitely better, but I'm sure they had more time to be able to work on that as well.
Right. Yeah. And it's not like it sounds terrible or anything. It's just when you compare it to anything Martin Birch has done or Ron Nevison or anybody like that, where there's like this depth and width and bottom, it just misses that part of it. But for me, it doesn't really take away from the song. I've always loved the song. It actually sounds great on the radio, which is how I perceive most 70s songs, because I grew up near Detroit and everything just sounded so good on the radio there. And that's just what my ears used to. So in the end, it didn't really matter. You know, still sounded awesome on the radio.
Yeah,
so who cares?
Hey, I mean, it's just an amazing song from beginning to end. I mean, the whole thing is, every part of it is just a brilliant song. And again,
It's epic.
yeah, and of course, I love epic songs, as you guys all know by now. But and it just
Yes.
and that guitar solo too. That's probably my favorite guitar solo of all time on a record.
Even though I do think the record could use some like enhancement, like depth and width wise, it's really exciting sounding right off the bat. Like, it doesn't sound tame. So there's something to be said for that as well. And that could just be what they were going for. Like, hey, let's not make this all bottom and mushy. Let's make this aggressive, and it is.
Yeah, and first song with Schenker, I don't think he'd been with the band that long, so I think they're still kind of honing in on their sound overall, because obviously they're a great sounding band, and all the records they made after this were all really good sounding too. So I'm sure part of it was definitely that they just probably, from what I've read, they didn't take a lot of time in the studio, and they were all still kind of new to each other and all of that stuff. But they still obviously made a brilliant record.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And one of the greatest songs of all time.
That's why it's on the list.
100%. It's interesting when you talk about guitar players and their tones and how they get them, and especially like elite guitar players. I just finished reading Alex Van Halen's book, which is really good, by the way. But he was talking about Eddie was just constantly tinkering and toying with different amps and different guitars. And he was always in search of like the perfect sound that I don't think he ever really achieved for what he thought it was. But it's just kind of interesting to hear that. I know Schenker's kind of been similar, even though the other interesting thing too about Schenker that makes it hard. So again, I don't play guitar, but every guitar player I know tells me that playing leads on a Flying V is really difficult. And that's pretty exclusively what Schenker played. And he sounds incredible.
I think, it probably has something to do with the neck width.
Yeah, it's the
thickness or width, something weird. But yeah, I mean, obviously he just loved the look of it, and that was more important to him. So he figured it out. But yeah, it's tonally, to me, it sounds like giant Marshalls. Like that's just what it sounds like. And I always wonder like exactly what they use in the studio. It's so hard to find that stuff out.
Again, this is important, not just because of Schenker, but because of UFO and, because of the influence they had on, whether it's Kirk Hammett or Steve Harris, or, you go on and on and on, but, every guitar player. And we're going to talk to Phil Demmel, who's an amazing guitar player. And he obviously massive Schenker fan, and he's played this song and the solo several times. So it'd be fascinating to break down the actual solo with him, because clearly he knows what he's doing. And I'm just listening to it going, it's great.
Oh yeah. The hunt for guitar sounds is interesting. And you mentioned Eddie, and I think Eddie actually hit the pinnacle of his guitar sound on the 1984 record. And then when they did 5150 with Sammy, the tone is great, but he started using that the fake stereo on the guitar, and that's when it started to sound a little like chorusy, and he just kept going from that point, and it just sort of started degrading for me. Then they worked with Bruce Fairbairn in the early 90s, and it kind of came back.
Yeah, Alex mentioned that 1984 was his favorite.
Yeah, production-wise, just overall, it sounds the best. But, I think when you're chasing something for too long, you end up in a bubble. And a lot of these guitar players just end up missing what they had. And it happened to me with Uriah Heep, with Mick, because he had switched to this new brand of guitar amps. And I don't know what it was. I can't remember. But I had his technician bring all his old Marshalls from the 70s to the studio session. And he set up his new rig, and, the tone was okay and everything. And he didn't know we'd brought all his old amps. Some of these amps he hadn't seen in 30, 40 years. And we set up his old Marshall rigs and plugged in, and it just sounded unbelievable. And he was like, I kind of forgot that I did this and I had this tone. And they were modded by some guy in Germany, and modded by Klaus on a piece of duct tape on the back of the amp and stuff. And I'm like, who the hell's Klaus? He's like, oh, he's this crazy guy in Berlin or something. But yeah, it's funny to like end up going full circle. I'm like, this is your guitar tone, like Les Paul into a Marshall, can't go wrong.
Yeah, that's the classic tone. I mean, or the V into a Marshall is super heavy. That's what Trouble used to use to get that super low sound, was they all played Gibson Flying V's through Marshall amps, and they would tune down too. You just couldn't get much heavier than that.
Everything on the amp, and a lot of times they would just turn the treble off. Because Marshall's, the bass knob goes 0 to 10, but it really goes about 2. Like it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, right. Insane. Well, again, one of the greatest songs ever by one of the greatest guitar players ever, and again, in my personal opinion, the greatest guitar solo ever written. But we can argue that, I'm sure, for days. But thanks as always, Jay. Much appreciated.
My pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me again.
All right,
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
welcome in now a man who has been in the following bands: the Bay Area legends Violence, another Bay Area legend Machine Head, Slayer, you might have heard of them, and currently he is the other guitar player for Kerry King's amazing new band, my friend Mr. Phil Demmel. How are you, Phil?
Hey man, how's it going?
It's good.
Played with some people.
Speaking of that, this is a very important song to me because Michael Schenker's my favorite guitar player of all time, and this is one of, if not the best leads, in my opinion, of all time. So I had to bring in a really good guitar player to talk about.
Oh shit! Was he
You were on my list, and then when we decided the song, I had no idea that you actually played this song on stage with Michael Schenker. That's insane.
It wasn't this song. It was Dr. Doctor.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Dr. Doctor. But you still played on stage with Michael Schenker.
So I had a couple of guitars made in 2009, and one of them was this one right here, which is my signature shape, the Demolition shape, in tribute to Michael Schenker. And it's got the split headstock. It's got the whole thing. So on the back here, we played Whackin' with Machine Head in 2012, I think it was.
Vakken.
Vakken, sorry.
Vakken.
Stupid American. And the Scorpions were playing. And so I was able to, Rudy had come to when Machine Head opened for Metallica in Oberhausen, I think. And James got up and played Aesthetics Hate with us. And so I get off a stage and I'm filming me singing Die Die My Darling on stage with the guys, and then I get off stage and there's Rudy Schenker. And I have the camera, I didn't have the phone by that time, and so I had my camera, and he gave me the blackout face, and like, fuck, Rudy Schenker. But his son was a big Machine Head fan, so we kind of kept in touch. And long story longer, we were playing Whackin', and I got Rudy to sign the guitar for me here. He was super stoked to do it. And whatever the brothers' beef is, the brothers' beef is.
Yeah.
I love them both. They both played the guitar. And then flash forward to maybe 6-7 years ago, Michael was coming through town, and I reached out to the local promoter who was putting on the show to see if I could come down and crash the meet and greet or something to get my guitar signed. So he puts me in touch with the TM, who his name's Chris Green. He eventually became Machine Head's tour manager, but first time I talked to Chris was like, well, yeah, come on down, but better yet, why don't you hop on stage and play Dr. Doctor with him? Like, what? What kind of, you better not be fucking with me, don't. Sure enough, he had a couple of guys come up and do it, one being Uli. But I was waiting for, how Michael is. So I was waiting for it just to go south at any point. It's like, I'm not even planning on getting the guitar signed. And there was a point in sound check where like his amp was fucking up, and he was starting to get worked up, and I was just like, here we go. It's going to go away. But sure enough, man, he got up and had me up at the end and played along with him. And I posted video of this is on my YouTube channel, but So we're playing Dr. Doctor, and at the end, I take the guitar off and have it out with a Sharpie on hand, and he's just noodling with his left hand, and with his right hand, he reaches over and signs the back of the guitar.
Yeah, I saw the footage. That was awesome.
Oh my God, so amazing, and had me take a bow with the band and the whole deal. So it was really a really cool moment that he did. He was super gracious in letting me do that, and so Michael Schenker and Randy Rhoads. So Randy Rhoads was the other guitar that I had made at the same time, and that's gone on to kind of, I'm just paying that Randy stuff forward. But, the Michael guitar stays at home with me. I don't take it on the road. It's signed by the brothers, there's like a clear coat over the guitar, it's not going anywhere.
Maybe it's good Michael didn't see, who signed it first?
Rudy did, actually.
Maybe it's good Michael didn't really probably notice that it was his signature. He might not have signed it. Who knows?
I don't know if I even said anything about it, but I don't know how he could miss it. I mean, he signed right almost on top of it, so
that's amazing. That's insane. Although I can't, every time I hear Dr. Doctor, it came on the radio the other day on shout out to Sirius XM, Ozzy's Boneyard. And every time I hear that song, I expect that Iron Maiden's going to walk on stage because that's their song they play before they go on stage. I'm so used to that.
It's like that Bob response, like you hear the music and you're like, okay, you start salivating because Maiden's coming on.
So now I always like to talk about this because I'm not a guitar player or a musician at all. I have zero talent in that. But I do know that playing leads on a Flying V is more difficult than other guitars. And I don't know if that's just a Gibson thing or if it's with all Flying Vs, but I know that people basically played the same guitar that Schenker played, said it's unbelievable that he can play those leads on that guitar because I think the neck's wider or something. Do you have any insight on that?
I don't. I know that he might like his action, which is the distance between the strings and the fretboard, to maybe be higher or something, but I have not heard. I think sitting down it's hard to play a V, but I find them, the easiest of guitars to play for me. I can't play a Strat or a Les Paul or anything. It's probably Michael's own guitar, which is super difficult.
Yeah, maybe I just have noticed with other guitar players that they, a lot of times, especially if they're in a studio and they're playing Vs, they'll use that for the rhythms, but they'll use like a Les Paul or even a Strat because supposedly those are easier to play the leads, easier to move your fingers. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. I don't play. That's what I'm told.
I haven't heard that. No, I think that, all the guitars are, and even from V to V, guitar, it varies. So it depends on the musician in that sense.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's just the way it's set up and how you're playing it, the way, because he kind of plays it differently when he's on stage. The guitar's kind of up a little bit more than normal. I think the V sits well when he's playing it to be kind of on his legs, so it's kind of anchored there or something. These are just things that I heard people say, so I'm just parroting them.
I'm gonna go with myth on that. We're gonna debunk and say no.
Okay, fair enough. You would know way more than I would, so I will defer to you on that. But that being said, we got to go back to Rock Bottom in this solo, which is the first record that Michael was on with the band, and clearly changed the course of what they were doing, and they became obviously a huge band. And even after he left, they kept going pretty well. But he's a young guitar player coming in, and I mean, I just remember hearing this record. I heard it after I heard Force It, because I heard Force It first, and then of course went back to this record. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But that solo is just, again, I can't play, but for me as a fan, that solo it's one of my favorite solos of all time. And I think pretty much one of the most legendary solos in all of rock and metal.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about Michael is he's so melodic in his playing, and they are songs within songs. And me and Zet from Exodus, he was played in the first band with him back in the early 80s. And so, but this was it would be the diddle-dee. So you had diddle-dee, 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 we'd say the diddle-dees, you'd use the diddle-dees like Schenker. It's super signature, but nobody played like him. Even the scales and some of the movements that he does are signature to him. You don't hear too many other players, unless they're playing covers, use the notes that he does. He's so good at the phrasing, and his technique is flawless. His bends, his little half bends are just flawless. The dude does not miss. He does not miss.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And again, he was so young making this record too, and just coming in, making this record almost off the street, more or less, was pretty spectacular. And the great guitar players, whether it's Van Halen or Richie Blackmore or Tony Iommi, Michael Schenker, they all have their kind of signature styles and signature sounds, and they're doing stuff that either other people had never done before, or as you mentioned with Michael, just stuff that like little nuances that are really, really difficult to do.
Yeah, the degree of difficulty coupled with new phrasing or new note selection or chord voicings that he's making them popular. They weren't popular to begin with. He is making them popular in that sense. I didn't hear the studio version for a while. My first introduction to UFO was the live record. And the live record, as back in the day, so many of my introductions to these bands, AC/DC, If You Want Blood, Live and Dangerous, Thin Lizzy, my first Judas Priest record was Unleashed in the East. It's all these Pat Travers, all these live records were so Kiss Alive. My God, the live records were Frampton Comes Alive. These are the records that really, I don't know if they made the band, but it gave them that introduction to what live rock and roll was all about. So hearing the live version of this solo and the interplay between Paul Raymond, who actually plays guitar on the song too, which is incredible. I love how, because he'll bounce back and forth. He's lefty, right? So he plays guitar and then he'll jump in and do the little dances behind it. And I've really grown to appreciate Paul in that sense. Especially I did a cover for a tribute show for a local guy that had fallen, and we had this unknown really guitar player who knew the rock bottom solo. Like, he played it so fucking good. And me and Tom Draper, he was in Carcass, were kind of like his backing guitars, and we were playing like the keyboard parts. So we delved into the song. We really got into what Paul was doing Michael's doing all the crazy shit, but then when it jumps into that harmony, and Paul has this crazy third, I think it's a third harmony, and joins in with him. It's just that I got goosebumps, and I do this a lot, but I got goosebumps just thinking of that harmony descending part, because I've ripped it off a number of times in my solos, just because I think it's the coolest fucking thing. I think there needs to be a greater appreciation for the musicianship of the whole band was amazing, top to bottom. But Paul Raymond added so much to especially the live version of the song.
Yeah, and that's what they really needed. I mean, I saw them early on with just Michael. He was spectacular and amazing. But yeah, adding him in, just, you need that full sound, and he could play keyboards as well, and backing vocals. So he kind of was the man that kind of filled in all the whole, so to speak, live. And of course, yeah, that record's a legendary live record. That was what really did set them off, certainly in the United States, was that record. Just came out. It was like, oh my gosh, like and again, like all those live records, just the production was better. The songs were played phenomenal. I mean, I'm sure just as all those live records where they weren't all really live, but nonetheless, they still were amazing.
I read a little bit on the record a while ago, but I think like two of the songs, and I'm probably wrong, but I think it's Mother Mary and maybe This Kid's were actually studio versions, and they just put the live music on top of it. And I would have never guessed that, but I don't want to see what's behind the curtain. Yeah. I just want to have fun and enjoy it. You get lost in the show. I don't want to call bullshit on TV shows. I'm just going to enjoy the ride, and, it's live. Fuck you.
Yeah, I mean, look, but all those records back then were that way. But like I said, they all came out so good, or such amazing records. The other thing about Schenker too that he probably doesn't get enough credit for, in my opinion, is that he's also wrote a lot of the music for most of those songs. And he's like his brother. His brother's like one of the master riff masters, and he's amazing riffs. But some of that rubbed off on Michael, because he's written a lot of really great riffs as well.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. The first 2, 3, 4 Schenker MSG records. So the one with Armed and Ready, the one with Attack of the Mad Mac, and the Bonnet record I like, Assault Attack, is great. Built to Destroy is awesome. I kind of got lost in the Macaulay era, but I love Built to Destroy. I love Gary Barden on those records. And I like that he kept the formula of having the guitar player, keyboard player, kind of just had that sonically continued doing that.
A couple quick side stories on Michael Schenker in general. So I'm good friends with the DJ who DJs for the Vegas Golden Knights at the games. And he plays a lot of really cool, kind of more obscure metal stuff. So I was at a game, and all of a sudden Armed and Ready comes on. I'm like, what on earth? Like, never heard that at a hockey game. That's like pretty obscure. So I texted him like, dude, where did you pull that one out of? He said, yeah, I've been saving that one for a while. So he's played it a few times, and he actually pulled it out when he didn't know he was there. But one of the games that Kerry went with me, he played that, and we're both. I told him I'd heard it before, but he's like, "What is this?" I go, "Yeah, right."
That's awesome.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, the other legendary story is that the December 30th, 1980, the Michael Schenker Group played the Country Club in Los Angeles, and everybody was there. Nobody knew each other. Like all the guys from Metallica, all the guys from Armored Saint, everybody's all there. Nobody really knew each other. And that was the night when my friend John Cornarins met this 16-year-old kid in the parking lot after the Michael Schenker Group show, wearing a Saxon European T-shirt, who ended up being Lars Ulrich, and we all became very good friends. And all of a sudden, some band they put together did okay over the years. But again, Michael Schenker pulling all these different things together, it's pretty legendary.
That was the MSG shirt, was the cool one to have in those early 80s because you knew what was up, you know.
Yeah, and now he's going out finally and doing a tour where he's doing all the UFO stuff, which people have been begging for years for him to do. And very, very wonderful for me that he's taking out Armored Saint opening for him. So
yes,
that's gonna be pretty cool.
I saw that.
But I hope to get to one of those because it should be fun.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see him do and I like the reboots he's doing of the songs with the other singers and the other musicians is cool. You know, there's just hit after hit. You said that he became such a riff writer. Yeah, there's so many. I mean, I jacked part of on the Category 7 Eder Stormen, our instrumental is Into the Arena, kinda, you know.
Oh, and I forgot to shout out Category 7, which is your super group project with John Bush and a whole bunch of these other guys on
your label,
on my label, exactly. So, but yeah, super cool stuff there too. It's interesting. I always like to talk to guitar players about this. So clearly, you have your influences, right? You talk about borrowing or whatever, being influenced by Schenker when you're writing this stuff. How does that work when you're sitting around, like just playing or writing something or thinking up a lead? Do you sometimes go back and listen to some of that stuff to get you inspired, or is it just it kind of comes out of your head? How does that process work for you?
I think that it's by listening to those songs so much, and especially with Randy and Michael. And one of my top 5 guys is Adrian Vandenberg, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, great guitar player.
So I still listen to those first 3 Vandenberg records a lot because all these guys have their way of just taking you on a ride with them through their leads. It's thought out, real structures are really fucking cool, and they kind of grab me in that sense. So I think that listening to these songs so much over and over, it's just ingrained in me now. It's in my guitar playing DNA. And there was a lead on the Onto the Locust where it was just straight up, just do the over the mountain and just throw the over the mountain, like that. And it's just, I don't see it as plagiarism. I think
that happens to everybody. I mean, nobody's trying to duplicate a
my
entire
influences
song
on
or
my
entire
sleeve.
riff, but I think you can be influenced by that. And I've just heard things like, for example, Metallica, that song Atlas Rise. The beginning of that is very similar to a band that came out in the 1980s on our label called Omen, who I've always loved. And if you like classic heavy metal, please go back and listen to the early Omen records. They're really, really great and ahead of their time. But there's a part there that's pretty similar to the beginning opening of Atlas Rise. Now, do I think James Hetfield has taken that from that? No, but I'm sure he listened to those records back in the early days. It might have stuck somewhere in his brain. So that's a cool part. Or even Lars, whoever put it together. But it's not like, we're going to rip off an Omen song. I think it's just kind of there. And so many in metal, so much stuff is so similar anyway that there's only certain chords and things and progressions you can really do over all this time. So some things are going to sound similar.
It's pretty incestuous anyways. And like you said, it's probably one of the Machine Head songs we were writing the ending, and it was Ghost Will Haunt Your Bones, and I'm doing this thing it sounds, and we wrote this ending with a couple of hits, and I'm all, what is that? That's something. We can't do that. And it ended up being separate ways. Yeah. It's at the end. And I'm all, we cannot jack separate ways. I know it came from somewhere, and that was one of those things where it did come from that feeling of, oh, this is where it could go. But it was so blatant that was one that the riff police pulled us over and said, no, you're go straight to jail.
It's kind of cool though, using a Journey riff for something heavy. But Neil Schon is a big metalhead. So
and all the metalhead guitar players love Neil Schon too.
Yeah, he's an amazing guitar player. Amazing guitar player.
One of the summer festivals back in 2009, and Journey actually was playing before us, and big. It was Manson and all these metal bands, and Journey was playing, and all the guys from the bands were just right on the side of the stage, singing every word and feeling every bit of it.
Oh yeah, I've always been a big Journey fan. I mean, and if you take away some of the vocals stuff and listen to some of those riffs, I mean, those are heavy metal riffs. It's good stuff.
Absolutely.
So you heard this song first off the live record.
Mm-hmm.
So then you went back and listened to the studio version later. What were your thoughts when you heard the studio version after being used to the live version?
I think it's a little slower, and it was missing that vibe that I wanted. That's why I probably didn't go back too much, because I preferred, the solo's truncated, so it's not as long. It just missed the vibe. I think that the live version was so encapsulating of everything, that going back to the one was a little, it's kind of, for me, it's going back, same thing, listening to, Unleashed in the East and hearing Genocide and hearing Tyrant, and then going back to Sad Wings of Destiny and going, not as good. Where's the gain? Where's the aggression?
See, I'm the opposite of that because I'm old. So I grew up hearing all those original studio records. So I love the studio records, even the first 3 Kiss records. I mean, look, Kiss is one of my favorite bands of all time, and Kiss Alive is one of my favorite records of all time. But I love those first 3 studio records. And even though the production wasn't really great on any of them particularly, but that's where I first listened to all. So you get used to listening to that. And it's the same way with this song. Oh, there's so many good versions of it out there. I love the studio version of this song. I just think it's incredible. What he's doing is so raw and yes, really cool. But and I never know if these are like, I don't know if they're necessarily, I mean, there's a lot of bootlegs of this too as well, but they're UFOs put a bunch of stuff out over the years where they've like taken different shows they've played, like on the BBC and a bunch of other stuff. But there's a version of this that I think they did live, I want to say 75 or something like that, on one of these BBC broadcasts, where that might be my favorite version of this solo between all of them. It's pretty spectacular. And there's also a version where they had Paul Chapman in the band for a brief period of time. So they had the 2 guitar thing going on.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Wow. It was only around for like maybe a 3-week tour or something. I think only in the UK. I'm not exactly sure, but there is a recording of it, like one of those BBC things or something. And it's if you can, I'm sure it's all over YouTube or even Spotify.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out because I'm a huge Chapman fan too, and that era of UFO as well.
Yeah, me too. But those 2 guys together, it was pretty amazing.
I bet. And
it sounded incredible. I was like, why did they? I don't know why it didn't work, but I mean, maybe ego guitar players. I don't know how that stuff goes, but it was pretty amazing while it lasted. And of course, he came back later after Michael left and was pretty spectacular.
I'm with you on the first 3 Kiss records because I did hear Kiss Alive first, but then I went back and found all the Room Service and all the little deep cuts that are on those records and Getaway, and that's one band that I will definitely go back and listen to the studio versions.
So we got to talk a little bit about your current project because it's phenomenal,
right,
and one of my favorite records of the year, and some of my favorite people in the entire world are in this band, Kerry King's band.
Yep.
And I was unaware how much you played on that record because originally when Kerry's talking about it, it sounded like Kerry's going to play most of the stuff on there, but then I found out that you had played a lot of the leads on that record. In fact, a lot of the leads that I really loved on that record. So
right on.
It's so great. How was that experience?
It was cool. I think that back in 2018 when I came out and subbed for Gary for that bit.
And Slayer, by the way.
And Slayer, right. I actually approached Kerry the first time they came through the Bay Area in earlier 18 maybe, and asked him, I said, so what do you got going on next? He's like, probably, me, Paul, and, maybe Gary, or not sure, but I'm writing, we're going right into it. And I said, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm still on Machine Head at that time. Didn't say anything. And then 3 months later, I announced my departure from the band. And next day, maybe even the day of, Kerry was like, That's why you were asking me about what I was doing. I said, absolutely. I would be honored, and if I just throw my name in the hat to be part of whatever you're doing in the future. Kerry had known. He goes, how he works. So he's very diligent in how he operates and need to know basis, So once he got things figured out, we were at a Raider game. It was the opening night, Monday night football game in Oakland, and he had come up. And Raiders won. It was a great night, and me and Marta are hanging out with him. We go out to Alameda, where some of the team, you've probably been to the bar there in Alameda.
Oh, yeah.
So with Panos and the dudes, and he pulls me aside, and, a couple tequilas deep at this point, and, okay, here's what I'm thinking. And then he told me that, me and Kyle and Paul, and didn't say anything about a vocalist at that point. But, I think somebody, Scott, Scotty Ferreira from, he was with EMG for,
absolutely.
He took a picture of that moment. Yeah, we did carry out his arm around me, and he's telling me, and so bringing me in, he knew I was on board. Then COVID hit. I went to the last Slayer show at the Forum, and
we were all there.
Yeah, and he says, last thing as we depart, he's all, when I know something, you'll know something, and then everything goes down, and it's just waiting and waiting and waiting. So couldn't tell anybody. There's NDA involved, and I told my family, of course, and so just played the waiting game. And as he was writing stuff, he would send me clips, and it was cool to see. He has them all on his, the drill. So he has them all on his phone, and I'm coming through with Violence or whatever, and he's playing me. Oh, here's some riffs here, and you listen to it, and it sounded fucking great. It had his. His fingerprint, it has his DNA on it. So it sounds, of course it's going to sound like Slayer, because it's him. It's the only band he's been in for, besides Megadeth for a couple of shows or whatever. But it's going to sound like him. And they were the band that made me want to play heavy music. I had an opportunity in high school to go with the Violence dudes, Death Penalty at the time, or play in a more marketable band, more rock, which I like. I love rock and roll, and I love a lot of the hair metal and stuff like that. Not something that I wouldn't do, but going and seeing Slayer on that first Northern California show, seeing that and saying, what the fuck is this? And have years later go, okay, hey, you can be a part of the dude that wrote a lot of those songs. And it's full circle for me, man. I've been so blessed and fortunate in all the things I've gotten to do. And this is one of them, to play with these dudes. And the band is phenomenal. Fucking Paul. Mark is one of the raddest humans walking the earth. But the dude who surprised me the most is Kyle Sanders.
Same here. So, Kerry, I didn't have to sign an NDA, by the way, but I knew who was in the band for a long time. And I was actually campaigning for Mark, because there was a question about that, not from Kerry, but from other folks that will remain nameless. But I was so happy for him, because I knew everybody in the band, and I was like, this is great. Everybody in the band are great human beings. I never met Kyle, but our good friend, we were just at his party a few weeks ago, Chris Santos, told me, like, no, Kyle's like the best dude. He's awesome. And I figured if Kerry's picking him, he must be. And yeah, he's amazing. Yes. And same thing. I didn't know what to expect with him necessarily, because he was in Hell Yeah and some other bands that were cool, but not really what this was. Man, he crushes it. And again, super great guy. So for me, I'm just so happy for, all my friends in that band, especially for Kerry, to be able to go out and be in a band with people he likes, and to go hang out and have fun and play incredible music. I mean, I think that record is like I said, is one of my favorite records of last year. It's phenomenal. I still listen to it now.
So back to Kyle real quick. So learning that he's going to be part of it, and I met Kyle back in the day. He played in he was in Medication. He played in Blood Simple, which I saw, and I like that band. But getting to the rehearsals, I hadn't had a bass player stage right with me in I don't know how long. With Violence, it was just me. With Machine Head, he's on the stage left. It's been 20 years since I had I don't know if I ever did. And Violence was always that. If it was Torque, then whatever. So I get to rehearsal, and he's just ripping my head off with the tone and the volume, and I'm loving it. It's because he's not missing anything. He's holding it down and playing so fucking good. I was shocked. He plays with his fingers, playing Chemical Warfare with his fingers. And I was really super stoked on that aspect. And him and I, we lock it down together. Our tones match really well. I think that there's moments when we're just more than moments, but I really, really enjoyed playing with Kyle. The rest of the guys too, but especially since he's my stage right partner, being able to lock in with somebody, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, the band's incredible. I mean, the few times I've seen it, just amazing, which doesn't surprise me in the least, because again, everybody in that band is phenomenal. And as you mentioned, amazing people. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this. I cannot thank you enough. Really appreciate your wisdom as the primo guitar player to talk about another primo guitar player.
Thanks for having me.
There you have it. Thanks to everybody on the show this week. The great Phil Demmel, our good friend, Mr. Jay Ruston. As always, Martin Popoff. Thanks to Lizzie Borden for our theme music. And the man that makes the whole thing happen, Mr. Christian Black. I will talk to you guys next episode.